You can't control people in Afghanistan, or can't control people in Japan or China, any place in the world, either by conviction or by being committed to that. I don't have to be watched over because I believe this.
Right.
Well, I don't know, that's an oversimplification, sound like a high school sermon or something, but I don't see any escape from those two possibilities.
And these people were highly talented, and they were convicted, and they were motivated by their conviction and their adoration, their faith.
That's it.
Yeah.
They were not expecting, well, how much money can I get for this? This is praising God.
Right. And moving the masses, which an artist who is an entertainer wants to do, in a sense.
How do you do that?
Right.
Greatness.
It's a great stage. Beautiful chapel, yeah.
Well, anyway, all those things are unpacking in the same world. See, the world isn't loaded with just a sack full of data, and if you control the sack, you...
By the way, just curious, though, but before we go any further, with Descartes and that time period, I just, you mentioned Aristotle, and, what about the apparent movement of Islam bringing Aristotle into the West, or the idea that a lot of the West was exposed to Aristotle because of the movement of Islam westward.
Praise his name. At the Battle of Tours in 1245, I believe, at 6 o'clock in the morning, Charlemagne headed off the Islamic invasion of Western Europe.
And that was where again? That was...
At Tours in Spain.
In Spain, that's right.
See, they had invaded all the territory.
And come up across the Straits of Gibraltar.
They were just about, you're correct, they were just about into the West. Well, Charlemagne headed them off. Well, I say that's a turning point in history, or all Western civilization would be Muslim today.
Okay.
There's no question in my mind.
But is it true to say that Islamic scholars had located Aristotelian or Aristotle's
there's technically
material.
No question at all about it.
And so they preserved it.
Another practical thing, and I've talked to them, I've read several books and talked to several physicists, they're Muslim physicists.
Okay.
They're still operating with Newtonian equations.
Okay.
Well, they can solve a lot of problems with those equations.
Right. At the common sense scale of
That's
reality.
where you get determinism and fatalism in Islam. The whatever will be. That song,
Right, like
Que sera.
like Yaki's anecdote about the British officer in World War II who being driven from one place to another by a Muslim national, and when they have automotive problems and the Muslim national is popped the hood and he's looking around the engine where there's gasoline and he's smoking a cigarette, and the British officer suddenly becomes alarmed and says, "Oh, you need to back away. You're going to maybe cause the engine to explode because of your cigarette." And apparently the Muslim national says, "Look, if Allah wants there to be an explosion, there will be an explosion."
Total fatalism, total determinism.
Yeah.
Now Newton, in some broad, maybe deistic sense, believed in God.
Right.
But Newtonian physics developed in less than a century, 55, 60 years, in the Newtonian world machine. Mm-hmm. So there starts one of the models in Western Christian civilization. If the world is a machine, then that escaped man is not part of that machine. But in 100 years, man's a part of the machine.
Right, we're a byproduct of the machine.
So, what you get all these other developments from that implication. If man's just a machine, then, but Newtonian mechanics, that's
right.
still practicing in Muslim physicists today.
Sure.
And they can solve certain equations, there's no question. Because Newton was not refuted, he was modified.
Right, he was regionalized.
And Aristotle's two-valued logic was not refuted because everybody that talks, is making truth claims or error in talk. You can't talk and deny Aristotelian logic, two-valued logic. Propositions are either true or false.
Yes.
Well, now if there's no truth, that's the wrong, you get into probability calculus and statistics and all the things that in a postmodern mind that you decided by counting. And what does news show up? You know, this is an example of that problem. They show 75% of how many people? Oh, 1,000.
Right.
But they're making an absolute universal declaration out of examining 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're making a claim far outreaching the evidence, right or wrong.
Sure.
They can't make universal claims on the basis of finite induction.
Right.
But all of science is finite induction, so what's going to happen to the laws of physics is in the hopper about that.
Right.
So anyway, these things are all happening in Western Christian civilization.
Right. And so, like you said, Descartes, in his time, he's trying to respond to the crisis of confidence and in truth and absolutes. Perhaps he's maybe trying to respond to the skepticism to try to locate some sense of
This is absolutely the case. And he was a mathematician. That's important. Because if you allow me, and I get to Gödel's theorem.
Right.
Gödel attacked the view of mathematics or number theory as not being self-sufficient. It does not explain itself, which I also hold, but for a different reason. Mm-hmm. But if that position is correct, then the absolute foundation of truth claims in mathematics is also limited.
Right. It's contingent.
It's contingent. And everything that's created is contingent, but to what or to whom is what the discussion is.
Right.
Anything that's made is contingent to something, someone. So contingency is not, I don't allow that to stay very long on the table of discussion because I'm certain that's true. Your shirt is contingent to someone making the shirt. You don't need God. That's going to happen to that argument.
Right.
Finite induction, you don't need God. You just need to explain the shirt. But see, when you get back to the cosmos and you get back to the periodic chart, DNA particle, you got an entirely different problem than explaining a house without reference to God, or your shirt, or your car. Those are all finite objects, but they're made, and they're made within structure.
And you assume an intelligence behind the design.
Now, see, I don't want you to give me this bicycle don't need God, and the shirt doesn't need God. I'm talking about that's why creation was the first thing to go in the scientific revolution in the 17th, 18th century. Creator goes, then all the categories go, and then you get into the world that we're in. Well, anyway, Descartes, we must not forget, if we have forgotten, that he was a mathematician. Right. Well, after Gödel's theorem, mathematics is not self-justifying. Right. After Gödel, 1934. This genius mathematician, I don't like him, see, because he took Russell and Whitehead to put Kippy to task. And you say, what does that have to do with Christian? Everything in the world. Scientific method will get the shaft, mathematics will get the shaft, then the next thing, language will get the shaft.
Everything becomes a matter of faith.
Everything becomes a contingent matter. Yeah. So by the time we get to the postmodern world, even language, that's the 17th century was censored in nature.
Yes.
18th century was censored in history.
Well, 18th in nature, 19th in history.
And in language.
In the 20th.
And then you get a contingency.
Yeah, multicultural relativism in the 21st century.
Those are all the stepchildren of the development in science and mathematics.
Yeah, so just to repeat that, 17th century's primary concern, as you have it here on the handout, is truth. The 18th century's primary concern was nature. 19th century history, 20th century language, 21st century multicultural relativism.
Exactly, that's how we get there without being able to trace this development. We come into the world ill-prepared to address it. But in this context, all these developments, see, I didn't do it, so I tell people all the time if they find certain elements in the Bible difficult, I said, well, now you take it up with the author. not with me. I'm just, if I'm going to do it, I don't have to be here. I just told them Sunday I don't have to be here. But if you want me to be here, this is I'm going to have to say that.
Right.
Well, they voted unanimous. They want me there. So, but anyway, if you want me to, I'm going to have to say something that very strange to you, perhaps.
Yeah.
But the whole history of thought is saying strange things to people with received views. Because they have myopia, what I call linguistic myopia. They can only see, they're short-sighted or nearsighted. But anyway, in that development, and then the next move will be radical developments in cosmology. That was the first technical science, cosmology.
Right.
Well, that's about creation. That's why the century that's in the notation about nature, it's no longer creation that they're talking about, it's nature.
Right.
Because creation is not a vocabulary of science. Creativity, but not absolute. But the Bible in Genesis 1:1, you do not have to get A plus in unpointed Hebrew to know what Genesis 1:1 says. In the beginning, in the absolute beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, he either did or he didn't. Of course, the universe is its evidence. And the periodic chart is its evidence. You can't have the 400, they change all the time. By addition, they don't just change. 337 elements of the periodic chart. But the simplest one is at the top.
Right.
But the simplest one, the most complex one, is down at the bottom of the chart. But you cannot replicate the periodic chart by itself. You're deciphering, you're decoding, you're not encoding.
Right, you're decoding nature.
You're decoding.
Or the structure of the universe.
Now, if that's true, then the creator and absolute creation is the origin of escaping all these problems. Now,
it was the foundation for Paul in Romans 1, for instance.
I say biblically that's crystal clear, but the Bible gets a shaft in these 3 centuries over the development of science. But science shouldn't have given it that much shaft. It had no ultimate ground for doing. But the church, its leadership, whether Catholic or Protestant, was not prepared to deal with that.
Well, and would it be true to say that the church had set itself up for embarrassment because they had baptized maybe too much of Aristotle?
Well,
and
that is no question. And assume Aristotle's metaphysics is what enabled Aristotle's empiricism to escape relativism. Because of experience, whose experience when?
Right.
Where? Yours, mine? Mm-hmm. So experience, we have experience, but experience by itself is not self-explanatory.
And his notions of earth, air, fire, and water.
Now, that just doesn't explain the periodic chart.
Right. I mean, I know he's trying to order things, but then like, moving from the power or impetus or what they say, desire, moving from desire as opposed to some idea of inertia or impetus, which I know later on developed.
How do you're trying to explain things without dealing with the implication of what develops.
Right.
See, if we have to deny Aristotle's, Einstein's equations to remain a Christian, I think we'd be in difficulty.
Yeah,
if Crick and Bonad's DNA particle has to be denied in order to keep my faith, I think I just have to do it. But I don't believe it is.